So thanks for the introduction and good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Giulia Tregnago and I'm Associate Editor at Nature Energy, where I handle manuscripts in the solar energy field. I know that my colleague Fabio Pulizzi, Chief Editor at Nature Nanotechnology, has already given an overview of nature research journals, so you will likely hear again about some of the most general aspects of these journals before hearing about nature energy and the editorial process. So this is the outline of my talk. I'll start with a brief overview of nature and nature-branded journals, and then I will introduce you to Nature Energy and its editorial team. Then I'll show you some of the content we have published in Nature Energy. And finally, I'll discuss the editorial process, as well as options for appealing on decisions and transferring manuscripts within journals. So Nature was launched more than 150 years ago in 1969, and you see the very first copy of Nature in the picture. So the original mission was to place before the general public the results of scientific work and scientific discoveries to aid scientists by giving an early information of all the advances made in any branch of natural knowledge, and also by affording scientists an opportunity to discuss the various scientific questions which arise from time to time. So you'll see that the mission has not really changed much from the original one, although there have been a lot of changes in science itself. So there have been decades of scientific advances, and the pages of Nature have celebrated many of them, as you see from the pictures. Nature covered like from biology to astronomy to computer science as well. And if you would like to have more information about the history of Nature, you can have a look at the link below. So along with Nature, we realized like there have been so many changes in science, and also having just like one journal with such a large breadth of topics was not enough anymore. So new journals have been launched. So the aim of Nature is still to publish the most scientific advances with the widest implications. So these results, really the significance of these results is apparent to anyone from many fields. Nature research journals instead tend to publish the most scientific, the most significant advance across the discipline each covers, and the significance should be really apparent to anyone in that discipline. So here there are just like an example of 6 nature research journals, but there are many more. And then we have Nature Communications, which is the open access journal of the Nature branded journals. And the aim is to publish the most significant advances across many sub-disciplines, with the significance of the results being apparent to anyone in that sub-discipline. As science has evolved, and also like grand challenges became more important, the publisher realized that just single individual disciplines are not enough to address these grand challenges. And so that was the reasoning behind the launch of the first nature research journal devoted to a theme rather than a discipline, which was launched in 2011, and it was Nature Communications, Nature Climate Change. And the aim was really to bridge between the physical and the social sciences with the aim of to address these challenges faced by the society. Other journals have been, other thematic journals have been launched since Nature Climate Change, such as Nature Energy, Nature Human Behavior, Nature Sustainability, and more recently, Nature Food. And especially for Nature Energy, the idea was to apply this model to energy research, so having both physical and social sciences in the same journal. So with that in mind, we really want to provide a forum for a broad readership that spans from natural to social sciences, but also to policymaker and industry. And we want to cover all aspects of energy. So not just the more physical sciences ones, so like generation and storage, but also distribution and management, and impact that these energy technologies and policies have on society. So what we look for in an article is, for sure, first the relevance to the journal readership, the significance of the findings. That should be, they should have like that sort of significance that is of broad interest to everyone in the energy field, and also conclusions which are strongly supported by data. Other considerations which are true, not for all the manuscripts, but for certain types of manuscripts. So say, for example, for social science manuscripts, the relevance to policy or society is quite important. For physical science manuscripts, the having novel mechanistic insights or a real conceptual or technological advance is quite important. So here I've put like some of the words of the subtopics in the energy field that we cover. And for example, like some are like more core disciplines like photovoltaics or catalysis or energy storage as well energy policy. Whereas other are like, we have little content on that. This is the editorial team. So it's 6 of us, 6 editors, 4 based in London and 2 based in New York. Nikki Dean is the chief editor of Nature Energy. Then Alex Zhang is the editor handling energy storage papers, and in particular batteries and supercapacitors. James Gallagher is handling manuscripts on catalysis and fuels. Me, I'm handling manuscripts in the photovoltaics area, but as well as wind and thermoelectrics, or more generally energy harvesting devices. Fuad Khan, that is based in New York, instead is our economic editor, and he looks at economics, modeling, and policy. And Jennifer Richler instead looks at human behavior, so all things that concerns social science. We at Nature Energy are like all full-time professional editors, so we're able to focus on science 100% of our time, and we did all the manuscripts that we receive at Nature Energy, and we all have a PhD in the relevant area that we handle for the journal. And so we have been all of us been in research, in academic research, before moving into this position. And this is really helpful when we have to assess the scientific content of the manuscripts. So we are completely independent, as we don't have any external editorial board. And also we are independent with respect to other nature journals. As an editor, the responsibility is mainly the selection of primary research manuscripts for publication. So that takes up most of our time. And then we also edit and planning content. As a part of this, we commission reviews, perspective, comment articles, and news and views as well. We commission special projects. And we also do a bit of science writing for the journal. As editors are at the interface journal and the scientific community, it's very important for us to remain in touch with the community, and that's why we typically allow 4 or 5 weeks a year to attend conferences or do lab visits. We also have other meetings or phone calls with experts with the aim to explore and develop standards, policies, and criteria. So now we describe you a bit of the content that we publish in Nature Energy. Beyond really primary research articles, we also have analysis. There are like studies based on the analysis of technology or system or intervention or policy that could lead to novel conclusions that could be important to a broader audience. Then we have reviews and perspectives. So while reviews are more balanced surveys of recent developments in the field, perspectives are quite similar, but like more intended to provide a forum for authors to discuss models or ideas from a more personal point of view. So they are kind of like more forward-looking and speculative than reviews. Then we have other type of content like consensus statement, news and views, and policy brief, which I will mention you and show you some examples later on. We also have more opinion-based pieces such as comments, and we have pieces written by editors such as editorials or research highlights. So we'll see some of these examples later on. The point I would like to make here is that as journal Nature Energy is really looking for application. So the applicative side of a finding is really important to us, but at the same time, we also consider and publish more fundamental work if the relevance to an energy device is apparent. So I've selected 2 examples for each macro field, like photovoltaics, batteries, and fuels, to show you a bit of what I mean with this. So on the left, you see a paper that we published last year, and it's about all perovskites tandem solar cells. In that case, the authors have so like the problem with all perovskite tandem solar cells is one of the challenges is to have a very efficient and stable low-gap perovskite subcells. And in that case, the authors have engineered the precursor ink and make sure that the tin in this low-gap perovskite does not go through oxidation. So they were able to stabilize the subcells, and this led them to obtain the 4.8% efficient or perovskite tandem solar cells. That in that case at that time was outperforming single junction solar cells. The second example instead is picture on the right of the screen, and it's about building integrated photovoltaics and how solar panels can be made movable and adapted to a facade of a building so that they can adapt to the weather condition and occupant needs. And that translates into energy savings in terms of heating, cooling, and lighting of the building. And that goes towards the direction of having carbon neutral buildings. As for batteries, I have like another couple of examples here. On the left, you see how the researchers were able to engineering the electrolyte as to have a battery that works well across a wide temperature range, going from minus 95 Celsius degrees up to 70 Celsius degrees. And on the right instead, this is a nice application, a nice demonstration of how new technologies such as machine learning tools can really help energy researchers to develop their technology. And in that case, machine learning tools were used to predict battery lifetime even before degradation has taken place, using just only early cycle data. So that's a quite promising field, and I guess we'll see more of these type of articles in the future as well. As for fuels generation, you see on the left an example of how researchers were able to demonstrate photoelectrochemical cells with solid electrolytes. So CO2 derived liquid fuels are often mixed with solutes in when you use liquid electrolytes, and that requires a further step for purification. But here the researchers were able to produce the same kind of fuels with a solid electrolyte, and thus the fuels was free of extraneous ions. On the right instead, this is like a solution to a practical issue, and in that case was the use of these photoelectrochemical cells under concentrated solar irradiation. And the authors find out that active thermal management was critical to produce hydrogen at very high rates. As mentioned before, we don't cover only physical sciences, but also social sciences. And in particular, we look at the socioeconomic implications for energy technologies. And on the left, you see an example of an article we have published recently on where the researchers find out the reduction in water consumption by hotel guests was achieved by giving guests real-time feedback instead of financial incentives, and that was quite interesting conclusion. And on the right instead, there was an article that tried to estimate which was the requirement in terms for energy society to provide a decent living for people. So beyond like these primary research articles, as mentioned before, we also published other type of articles, such as reviews, perspective, and consensus statement. So you see that we try to cover different aspects of the technologies and different fields. For example, on the perspective at the bottom left, you see how authors have discussed practical pathways to actually to have a high energy and long cycling lithium metal batteries. Or we also look at the importance of social relations in shaping energy demand, or which are like the advances and challenges in understanding the electrocatalytic conversion of carbon dioxide to fuels. As a consensus statement are in a sense quite similar to reviews, in the sense that they rely on published works, but the distinctive feature of consensus statement is that are a consensus between a large number of researchers, and it's quite rare actually that we publish this kind of of documents because they require really a lot of work from the community. But in this case, the group led by Monica Liracantu and Eugene Katz was able to bring together like 63 other scientists working on the process solar cells, and they find out that while efficiency is already there, is very promising, and a lot of advances have been made in the field over the last few years, stability is really an issue. And to be able to sort out this issue, they found that having a more consistent assessment and reporting of perovskites to assess stability would have helped the community in developing stable solar cells, and so they basically put together all the recommendations on which many of the scientists working in the field agreed on. The consensus statement is actually open access, so if you want to have a look at that type of content, you can download it from our website. Still, like on talking about this radius or perspective, what we plan as editors are also what we call theme collections. So are special projects where we contact various researchers in the fields, and all of them analyze from different point of view, from different angles, a topic that we think is quite timely for the field. So quite recently, for example, we have published such collection on social dynamics of energy behavior or extremes in energy system from the perspective of finance, law, or climate modeling, or the energy in humanitarian context. So taking into consideration humanitarian aid, from shelter to lighting to clean water and medical system, for example. And also we have more conventional physical sciences collection, for example, the challenges and advances in solar fuels and electrofuels, or the challenges in upscaling and deploying solar cells, or in batteries when thinking about automotive applications. Beyond that, through our journals, we also try to engage with the community. So, for example, with editorial, we try to be editorials are written by editors of the journals, and we try to be part of the conversation and of the community. We also offer comments for researchers as a platform for important debates. And also we commission news and views, which are brief articles where an expert in the field explained the importance of a recently published article, which could have been published in Nature Energy or in another journal. So the idea is with these news and views, to speak to other researchers in the energy field, but maybe not directly in that subfield covered by the manuscript, and to explain them why that discovery is important. Other tools that we have to engage with the community have been, for example, the solar checklist. So this has been a community-driven initiative, and especially since these emerging source photovoltaic technology were developed, researchers find that there was not a lot of consistency and transparency in reporting the various either testing conditions or device specifications, and that was really hampering the development this emerging photovoltaics technology. So together with authors and reviewers, we developed this solar cell reporting summary, where we put all the key information that should be really important to reproduce the data. So it's not that we ask authors to, we don't want to oblige authors to do certain things, but it's just like to have a document that now is published with papers, along with papers, and it really makes evident where all what the key information are and where can be found in the article. Another initiative that we set up quite recently is about data availability. So now all our articles have a data availability statement where we say where all the information, where, like, let's say the minimal data set, which are the data that are needed to replicate the findings that the authors are reporting, can be found. So it could be either in the manuscript itself, in the supplementary information, or upon request to the authors. However, we do strongly encourage data deposition in public repository, so data are publicly available to everyone. More recently this year, we launched this new format, which is called Policy Brief. This does not apply to every manuscript that we publish, but it's more for manuscripts that have some implications for policy. So in that case, as policymakers are not really able to understand the scientific papers, these kind of papers are associated with a policy brief, where we put a summary of the policy messages in a very easy way to read, so policymakers can make use of them. Okay, so now I'll start to talk about the editorial process, and because I realized that often it's looked as really a black box. So from an author perspective, it might seem that after paper submission, the editor maybe does something, and then you receive a rejection letter. It's actually more complex than this, and this is probably a more appropriate way of seeing the whole process. So once a new manuscript is sent to Nature Energy, it is, depending on the topic of the manuscript, is assigned to an editor. So we are 6 of us covering all the aspects of the journal. And once it's assigned, we assess the manuscript against published work, against its significance to the field, and if needed, we discuss the manuscript with the other colleague in the Nature Energy team, and then we reach a decision. The decision could be we can decline publication of the manuscript, or we can send it out to peer review. In that case, we select reviewers, and once reviewers send in the reports, again we analyze the reports and we discuss them with our colleagues if at the journal level if needed, and then we decide whether to decline publication again or to invite for revision. So this process is repeats many times as needed until there are no technical concerns left from the reviewers, and in that case we proceed with the acceptance. And typically we might commission news and views if we think the piece has something to tell to other researchers, and we can also think about press release if the significance of the findings has more broader implications to the society. So the editor selection criteria are the so editors normally look for papers that have the greatest scientific significance, but we're not really making a technical judgment on the quality of the work, and we are not basing our assessment on the quality of the writing. So we really try to answer this question, which are is the findings a significant step forward towards a key disciplinary goal, will have a clear impact in the field and possibly beyond, will provide important new directions to research, and is it addressing a question that is broadly interesting for the journal readership. And as said, we also have other aspects that we took into consideration, such as the mechanistic insights, the conceptual and technological advance, or relevance for policy and society. So the judgment about which papers are reporting results that are in principle suitable for publication in Nature Energy is made by Nature Energy editors and not its referee. Broadly, we only 20% of submitted papers are sent out for peer review. So about the style and format, like for the initial submission, it's not really necessary that the article is styled according to Nature Energy style and format. But of course, it should be reasonably long and reasonably formatted, as you don't really want you really want to get your message go through. So actually, style and format will be all the details about style and format will be given later in the process for those papers that are close to acceptance and publication. About peer review, we use experts from around the world, and we continuously add reviewers to our database. Just to give a number, like more than 19,000 reviewers have been used across Nature journals in 2011, and we usually select 2 or 3 reviewers to review each manuscript, and we select them on the basis of their technical expertise, their breadth of knowledge. We look for people that can be fair, so give a fair judgment of the manuscripts. We try to avoid any conflicts of interest. We look for referees that are constructive, and also we try to think about diversity when thinking about reviewers. And we both use our knowledge to find out the best candidates, best researcher for reviewing a certain paper, but we also take into consideration the author's suggestions. So the task of the reviewer is give a technical assessment of the manuscript, so the general quality of the data, whether experimental there is enough experimental support for conclusion, and if the experimental approach meets the field standards, and if there are sufficient information provided in the manuscript. But it also they can give us a more subjective assessment about the extent of conceptual advance, the likely interest of the findings to the field, as well as the likely impact on future research, as well as inform us about overlap with previous work. There is an option for double-blind review. So we usually assume that by default, single-blind peer review. That means that authors do not know who reviewers are, but reviewers can know who the authors are. But authors can, however, opt for a double-blind peer review. That means that their name are not displayed, but however, it's the author's responsibility to ensure that the submission is fully anonymized, so to remove any reference to the group that is leading the research. So after we get the paper is sent out to review, and we get reviewers' report. We decide whether to consider further the publication, the manuscript for publication, or to decline publication. So an important point is that peer review is not what is called show of hands. So in that sense, we don't really count votes, but we consider arguments. So we go through all the reports that we receive from reviewers, and we weigh each argument for its importance. And as this is quite important because sometimes reviewers disagree, and often they have good reasons for that. And so as editors, we might be in the position of overruling reviewers, both positive and negatives, especially on very subjective points. So we really try to use our judgment also to understand on which of the reviewers' requests are feasible and are really improving the manuscript. So in the end, it's editors and not reviewers that decide what is published in the journal. When an author is invited for revision, the aim of that process is really to address the major issue, particularly those that are like highlighted by the editor. And so in that sense, we really want to try to avoid any ineffective revision cycles and numerous rounds of review in that sense. So if you have any question, of course, you can consult with your editor, who can provide guidance to you to resolve any issue that you might encounter when doing revisions of your article. So in case we have declined a paper, authors have two other options. One is appeals, and the other is in transfer. So can you challenge a decision? Yes, you can. And we at Nature Energy, we consider all appeals, and all appeals are seen not just by the handling editor, but also discussed with another senior editor in the Nature Energy team to ensure that the decision is fair, balanced, and consistent. But in the end, only few appeals are really successful. So reason for appeals could be that if you have any additional data that have been identified as essential for the study, either from the peer review process or or from the editor. If you think the reviewers or editors have made significant factual errors or missed important points, they undermine the main reason for rejection. So that should be really at the core reason for rejection in that case. Or if you have specific or concrete evidence of reviewers' bias. When appealing is not the best choice, instead, is when there are subjective disagreements on novelty or significance. What helps in preparing your appealing documentation is to provide compelling scientific arguments instead of opinions, to offer potential new data or information that can help the decision, and discuss how the findings really extend previous work in the field. Instead, it doesn't help if you rewrite paper to make only marginal changes, or if you don't really substantiate the claims for bias. or if you rely on celebrity endorsement or on your own reputation, or also like criticize previous papers in the journal. The other option is transferring manuscripts to other journals. So if a manuscript is declined by one of the Nature journals at any stage, the author can transfer the study to any other journals within the Springer Nature portfolio. When transfer takes place between Nature journals, the referee reports and reviewers' identities are also transferred. And this helps the receiving journals to speed up the process. So you can decide whether to transfer your study or just submit it as a fresh submission to the journal. It's up to you. But usually transfer saves author times because you don't have to reformat the study or like re-enter the data in the online system. And also transfer of referees reports usually leads to a quicker decision at the receiving journals. And it's also a more efficient use of referees' times. But please remember that editors at the receiving journals will make an independent decision. So the key takeaways of the editorial process is first to get your main message across, especially this is especially important when you first submit the article. Remember that we look for papers with potential, and also like as handling editors is there to help you through the editorial process. And in the end, editors and not referees take the responsibility for the decision of what is published in a journal. And the goal of peer review is to improve papers, so make the most of your opportunity when asked for revisions. And we do consider appeals in case where the concerns can be resolved. And otherwise, our manuscript transfer system gives you options to try and submit your article at another journal. And with this, I would like to conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.